Yate shike do shidene, she winoka yepa yenishe, gloganishlin do batani bashichin, ashien dashache do toaglinie dashanele, akotego dene atsan nishlin. Hello, everyone. My name is Winoka Yepa. I am Dene, originally from Chirac, New Mexico, and I serve as the Program Manager of Research and Education at Native Americans in Philanthropy. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for our member education sessions, where we'll be discussing Indigenous language acquisition and preservation. Today, we also acknowledge the UN's International Mother Language Day, which honors linguistic and cultural diversity, encourages multilingualism, and advocates for the preservation of Indigenous languages globally. For this session, we are joined by two language leaders who will lead a discussion on language acquisition and preservation efforts, emphasizing the resilience and significance of Indigenous languages as vital components of cultural identity and resistance against historical oppression. Native Americans in Philanthropy is also thrilled to welcome two members of our Native Youth Grantmaker program, Kala and Makea, who will be featured later in the program. We are honored by their presence and look forward to hearing more from them. Moving forward, expect to see more of this intergenerational collaboration as NAT remains dedicated to amplifying diverse perspectives within the philanthropic sector. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, President and CEO of Poston and Associates, Steph Poston.
Good afternoon, everybody. Wherever you're at, might be good afternoon, it might be good morning, but so excited to be here. What an amazing topic. And I want to also start out the Daikam Biena the Bachuem, Heiku and the Daiko Wem, Shuri and Kewem. So I just introduced myself in our tribal language, the Tiwa language. I'm from the Pueblo of Sandia. And as was mentioned, I'm the owner of Poston and Associates, a full service marketing and communications firm. I work with a lot of tribes and tribal serving entities across the country and some international work. So super excited for our panelists. I want to have them come up to the virtual stage. And first we will start with our two panelists, and first with Dr. Arroyo, if you'll come up to the stage.
Aloha kakahiaka kako, maikala hikiaka lako, mayuka ake kai, aloha e na akua, na auma kua, na kupuna, na hoa aloha, aloha no. O wau no Wai'ale'ale Arroyo, he Hawaii au, he hope peleki kena au ma ke kula o Kamehameha. Aloha no.
Welcome. And next to the virtual stage is one of my Pueblo sisters, Celeste from Cochiti Pueblo.
Hello and good morning. Rawa Gahini Hopa. It's morning here, well, almost noon in New Mexico. Welcome. Hin henat it's ase gochinak sitjan hijani hanach, and I just welcome you to join us today. And from the Pueblo of Cochiti, I'm a mom of two and recently stepped into the position of the head of school for the Keres Children's Learning Center. So thank you.
Welcome. And we're super excited. As we've mentioned, we have junior moderators who will be joining us and helping out with the questions and helping facilitate. So with that, I will welcome up Makea, and if she'll come up to the virtual stage.
Hello, everyone. I am Makea Lockley, a citizen of the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina. I'm currently employed by the Triangle Native American Society, where I'm assisting with the creation of an organizational archive. And I'm also completing the internship with our tribe under the direction of our Tribal Historic Preservation Officer. I'm really excited to be here with everyone.
Thanks, Makea. And next is Kala. Kala, come up.
Aloha mai kako, ovaho o Kalamana Mana Harmon. Hello, everyone. My name is Kalamana Mana Harmon. I'm a Native Youth Grantmaker, and I'm currently an intern at Tamalpais Trust. I've had a long relationship with language revitalization. I attended the Kula o Navahi o Kalani o Pu'u, which is the Hawaiian medium school, where Hawaiian was everything was taught through the medium of Hawaiian from K through 12. And I also attended Punana Leo Hilo, which is our Hawaiian language nest. So yeah, so glad to be here, and thank you for having me.
Yay, welcome everybody. So as I mentioned today, our series of questions will be kicked off by one of our very own junior moderators, Kala of Hawaii. Kala, welcome to the program, and we'll turn it over to you.
Mahalo. So the first question that I have for our panelists is, what has your own language education journey looked like? And maybe I'll start with Dr. Wai'ale'ale.
Mahalo for that. My language journey comes way before Kala's journey. And so I came from a generation, 2 generations back, where language was not spoken at all in our family. During the time when both my mother and my grandmother was born, there were no language schools and opportunities. Those that were present in our kingdom prior to occupation had already been gone in our lives in the late 1800s. And so for me, that journey really started when I was much, much older. I was in college trying to figure out who I was as a Native Hawaiian, and decided to engage in Olelo Hawaii in college, and really expanded from there. What really happened for me was the moment I had children, and had this moment as a parent of 3 children, thinking through the future of what it meant to be Hawaiian in our home and in our place. And so at that time, when I had my first child and needed to decide on their education, having gone through the University of Hawaii myself and an educator myself, I really decided that it was important for them to be educated in our language. So like Kala had mentioned, also true for my children, they were educated in the Punana Leo. I was super grateful for that opportunity. Punana Leo o Kamako at that time, all of my children. And then as our children got older, we have them, and I still have one in the school at Kekula o Kamako, which is a Hawaiian language immersion charter school on Oahu. And it's been an amazing journey, but one that I believe I'm still a language learner. But also a very, very huge language supporter in everything that we do around our identity and our language preservation. And it's been such a privilege to see our people grow and our language grow from, nearly extinct not so long ago, through having as many as close to 30 Hawaiian language medium schools here in Hawaii for the opportunity to continue our language and education. So my journey is very common for my generation, where we weren't raised in the language, but we choose to raise ourselves and our children in the language as we got older. So mahalo for that question, Kala.
Mahalo. And then, yeah. Celeste, would you like to?
Sure. So mine, actually, pretty sure it began in my mother's womb, as far as listening to my mother's tongue, and hearing as I was in her womb and being born. I was blessed to have been raised by my grandparents and my mom, of course, and so all fluent speakers of our Keres language. And so it was every day listening and learning. I was always told that, learned that when I went to our local Head Start program, that's where I wasn't speaking after going to school. And so as I grew up, and then in the 90s, the Pueblo itself saw need for language revitalization. I remember it being heavily focused. Our summers were focused on like English reading, and then there was that total switch that happened after a survey was put out to the Pueblo to the people. And so that's when the language revitalization program began. And being part of that, being enrolled in the program, English was forbidden in that setting. And so that's where the language learning continued for me. And I know a lot of English was spoken in our home, and along with my cousins, and my brother picked up the language from our grandfather, and so that's how the language journey has gone for me. And now, along with what was mentioned before, having, of course, children, that has made a significant need and want that I have for my children, and being able to speak and listen and learn. Very, very thankful that there's a school to provide that for our children. Of course, it's a choice because we have the local schools, public schools available, but so it continues. It doesn't end. I'm still in that process as well, as far as language learning, and continue to try with my staff daily. I'm in a place right now where it's safe to take those risks of, well, I'm not sure if I'm saying it correctly, but there's always somebody there to help and support. We have that great support system there at the school, not only for the children, but our staff as well. So like I said, it was mentioned that the journey doesn't end. It's still a learning process.
Mahalo nui for sharing your stories. And yeah, I totally understand that. I definitely want to continue improving my Hawaiian and learning more about our stories and our traditions and so on. But related to the first question, our second question will be, how do you believe language extends beyond words and grammar? And we'll start with Celeste this time.
Okay, as far as like our Keres language, I think language is used in context. It's not specifically words. I know a lot of the language learning that happens now is we focus on certain just words in general, and then we broaden it to a phrase, and building that, scaffolding that knowledge. But language is all around us. It's who we are, and in our homes, during ceremonies, it's in the community. It's a way of communicating, not only to the living, but our spirits that we call upon for support in time of need. I was always told you need to learn your language because our spirits don't understand English, and it's important to learn the language, to learn prayer, so that when we need to ask for help, we know who we're asking and what we're asking for. So language, it truly does extend beyond just words and grammar.
Yeah. I love this question so much because, as many of you know, our Hawaiian language and culture is used quite, I mean, it's the driver of Hawaii's tourism space. And for many of us, we've grown up with street names that have, Olelo Hawaii. Place names were replaced, our traditional place names were replaced with others that inaccurately describe that place or make no sense to us as Native Hawaiians. And so when we think about our language, it really is our identity, our life, our culture, our kupuna, as was said before by Celeste. It really is our ancestors. And if we're not thinking through how the language is used in context, which is very much our Hawaiian language, I think we do it in injustice. We're not using the words in the right way. And I just have this one example, because everybody knows the word. You probably know two words in Hawaiian, if not anything else. One is going to be aloha, because it is used everywhere in the world. And you probably have the most simplest meaning in your head as hi, hello, or maybe even love. And the other word is ohana, and that was probably made popular because of Lilo and Stitch, if you've watched anything in Disney. But to me, that really is the basic level of our language. If you truly understand the word aloha, there's about 40 different meanings to describe aloha in our context, and it matters in our context, in our time period. Who are we speaking to? What are we speaking about? Changes that word of aloha to love, to affection, to compassion, to mercy, to pity, to kindness, to charity, greetings. It can be a sweetheart. So all of those things describe our language and the richness of our knowledge systems, of our cultural practices, of the extensive history of our people. And so all of that begins with understanding and utilizing our language. Without that level of understanding, I do think we miss the opportunity, and we miss the ho'ailona, and we miss the messages of our ancestors, of our kupuna, if we don't know and embrace our language beyond just those words and grammar.
Yep. So mahalo for this. And yeah, I totally agree with the both of you. Having language is a big part of my identity. It grounds me. And yeah, mahalo nui. So we'll be moving on to the next couple of questions, but mahalo.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, words do matter, and they're so meaningful, even in my own tribal language here, Tiwa, or spoken by the Sandia people and a few of the other pueblos. The descriptors of even just our beautiful Sandia mountains, and when there's snow on them, and that description of it is just so much more beautiful in our language. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to move on to the next question, and I'll direct it to Celeste first. Is what is the most pressing issue challenging language acquisition and preservation efforts today?
Yeah, so it was mentioned about the knowledge systems. We're back in the 90s, it was like 65 years and old were fluent speakers, 65 and younger or older. And so now, I mean, time has passed, and so the loss of our knowledge keepers when I'm asked, or I think of it, it's like a crisis. We're in that position to think, well, we don't have that many of our elders, and you think of when you hear of an elder passing, and it's painful as the youth, and you think about it, and so that's one thing that's challenging. So creating ways of sustaining that, as far as providing our adult learners to help to learn the language, and so not only our children but our adults as well, because it's impacted because it's not being spoken at home. And so that's one of our I think it's one of our pressing issues as we teach and try and preserve. Funding is also a concern. We are a nonprofit, and so looking for funding can be difficult because we don't always get the state funding that is allocated to many other tribes and districts as far as language learning. So so those are some challenging concerns that as we move forward in this effort, is making sure that we have our knowledge system still and tapping into that, because That's where our language is. That's where the knowledge is. And so it can get pretty, it's painful to think about. And as far as like us as a people reclaiming our education of our youth, that's a big step into where, as far as like KCLC, the Keres Children's Learning Center, has moved away from teaching the Western way of learning and reclaiming what we have and what we can provide for children of the Pueblo.
Awesome. I noticed here at our Pueblo, we have a cohort of young adults who are really immersed in it. And you could see the massive progression. And it really makes me proud when I hear those young adults conversing and really how they show up differently, even for the younger and older people, to be an amazing teacher and share the knowledge. It's very powerful to watch here at my Pueblo, the Pueblo of Sandia. So I can appreciate your comments. Dr. Arroyo, same question. What are some pressing issues?
You know, the language movement really started in the early 70s with the constitutional convention that set the stage for Hawaiian language to be the second official language of the state, so sitting alongside English. And that really grew this Renaissance period for us, where language was being sought after. At that time, there was an estimate of between 2,000 and 3,000 speakers left. And as Celeste had mentioned, many of our kupuna were passing away with those knowledge, with the language. And there was just some extraordinary leaders at that time that decided that they were going to do something about it. And so think about our journey today. We have about 30,000 around. The estimate today that we use is about 30,000 language speakers. But that really came about because of advocacy towards growing our identity and our desire to reclaim our identity and our language and our culture and our sovereignty to some extent, the word ea and what that meant. So today, when I think about some of our challenges, given the extraordinary history, and really grateful for those leaders, because I wouldn't be able to do what I do today, we have to remind many who come to Hawaii that Hawaii is our native land. There is no other place in the world that our language and our culture and our practices will exist. No other place. I can't go back to another place to learn all of that. It exists here and only here in Hawaii. And so we make up now less than a quarter of the population, as many of our people have moved away because this place has become unaffordable. And so the challenge for us is really to keep our language, our culture practices alive in our home, in our place, on our lands. And that's been really important, and one of the things that has really driven all of us to say, let's not forget Hawaii, and our language lives and thrives in Hawaii and no other place. I think the other is we have a massive shortage of educators, and this is true across the nation for just public education in general, and then our students population for Hawaiian language immersion schools in our public schools are that families are interested in their enrollment is going up, but we don't have enough educators. And so we've been working on strategies as an organization to grow educators. And the challenge is not only do you have to qualify at the state level or being a licensed teacher in our public school, but you also have to have a very strong and in-depth level of Hawaiian language in order to teach through the language. And that is no easy feat. That requires someone to have basically 2 bachelor's degrees in order to be a starting teacher in any of our systems. And then the last thing I would say is technology is both, we love it like today we get to share our stories and our people and our history, but it's also can be stifling and can be a challenge for our language, because access is so available freely for anyone and everybody across the nation, which is a good thing for our people who are across the world. And at the same time, it can be used and misappropriated because access is so easy. And so trying to find that that right balance between the use of technology, I think is one of our challenges as well.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think there's a lot of people still struggling with that whole technology and the artificial intelligence, and does it help us, does it hurt us? And I think that'll be a debate for a long time. So Dr. Roy, I want to keep with you still on the forefront on how do Indigenous-led language initiatives differ from others?
You know, I think this is important for us to know the difference, because when Indigenous-led initiatives are implemented, to me that means the right mindsets, the right native lens, the right value set of our people and our language are already the foundation of the initiative. It's not trying to bake it in. It's not trying to ensure that it's included. It's already there, and it is the foundation from which efforts grow. And that's really important, because language acquisition, cultural preservation, our identity, those are all important to us, and the way in which we will implement initiatives are going to be for a higher purpose. So language acquisition isn't just about language preservation, right? It's about the preservation of our identity, the preservation of our culture, of our practices, and really developing our youth and our ohana and our families and communities in a way that brings pride to who we are as Native Hawaiians, that brings that equity, social justice, all of those important efforts for us as Native people. So those initiatives are really embedded in our values, as well as a larger purpose for our people around our rights as Native Hawaiians to practice our culture, to practice our language, and to lead the future the way we believe it needs to be led by our youth for our future. It's different, quite different of a starting point in my mind.
Yeah, thank you for that. Celeste, how do Indigenous-led language initiatives differ from others?
As far as tribes being able to create curriculum is important, and just to safeguard what is being taught, because we have that direction from like our tribal council to protect what is created, because we cannot purchase curriculum anywhere, and so it's created. We have that capability as our staff to have that native lens, like what was mentioned before, build on our core values as Pueblo people. And as far as KCLC, the Montessori pedagogy that was adopted to support, to be in service of teaching the language, because it creates a language environment for it to be open and to be creative in how we teach our children. It's goal driven as far as language being the goal. In our immersion practice, that's what it is being exposed to language all day, and so being able to create that curriculum is we don't have that capability of just purchasing curriculum. And so I think that's very important when we're thinking of it being Indigenous led. And yeah, I think of the little ones, because I've taught in public school, and shunning a child for wanting to sing, wanting to sing in their language in their classroom. But like here at the school, it's encouraged. Being able to share who they are as little as they are, being able to share that with their classmates, and being proud of it, being proud of that self-identity. And that's always what's encouraged. And of course, the learning of the language. It's a safe place where they that we've created, that they have that safe place to try and not be ashamed of who they are as Pueblo children, and of course people, because we have our staff as well.
Great. Yeah, I always encourage questions from the audience. So I want to make sure we have a question from the audience, a question from Tim. And I really love this question. We'd love to hear about representation in the learning curriculum, including geography, social representation, the local flora and fauna. How can they better serve? And I'll direct that to Dr. Arroyo.
Yes, all of those things, right? I mean, if we aren't including our stories, our own gods, our own goddesses, our own practices in education, I think we might be doing it wrong, right? I mean, I want our kids to know and love this place that we call home in ways that they see our relationship with land, our relationship with Aina is really, really critical. I mean, we cannot be separated from that. And so in content and curriculum, there are, more common things that you might hear, like place-based learning, those kinds of more buzzword like, but really it's about using the land and our language and our culture to learn. And it doesn't matter if it's in our classrooms or in our public or private schools, or in community. We have quite a significant amount of community-based organizations that are Hawaiian culture-based education, and all of that is included. Our lands, our plants, our animals, our atmosphere, right? All of that, our cultural practices are all included in our curriculum. They cannot be separated from that. One initiative I think that might be an interest to you folks as you're talking about curriculum is we had a few hundred, over a few hundred educators come together to share curriculum and content, both in Hawaiian language and in English. It's called vaihona.net. And it really is meant to be by educators who need to, as Celeste had shared, we have to generate our own content and curriculum. Nobody else is going to do that for us. And so they are able to share with each other to put any kind of content and curriculum that they want, and it's free for them, and it's something that we provide as an organization because it's extremely important to us to continue that.
Wow, that's awesome. I just want to make sure I give Celeste a chance to, because I know she spoke a little bit about curriculum, about the question from the audience about representation, but curriculum, including geography, social representation, local flora, fauna.
Okay, so when she mentioned like land-based learning, we have an educator that does that using the land to teach. And so our traditional calendar is based off of, that's what we use. We build it up into quarters, and we really see what's happening within those months, and to teach and build our curriculum. And that goes to teaching, like our year-long is respect and cultivating respect. What does that look like in this during this time of year? So respect all around, and so teaching those core values and embedding that into the curriculum. It's very important as far as respecting the land, what we use the land for, and so it's widely used. I feel like it's embedded in our traditional calendar. And now we're coming up into the planting season, and so that's going to be heavily discussed during our planning sessions.
Yeah. So great to hear those answers and how we really incorporate the land and the living things around us, because what we consider here in our language is a living thing, and how we honor that and tie that is just amazing. Next up, we've got another set of questions coming from Native Americans in Philanthropy, Native Youth Grantee. Makaya, you're next. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Hello again. Thank you so much for all your insight that you've been sharing, about language and everything surrounding that. It's been really insightful, and I've been taking notes. But getting into that, a question I want to share is, in planning for this session, I thought it was interesting that this panel was slanted towards educational and more specifically children's educational efforts. Can you please speak to the value of investment in our youth and our future generations? And I'll start with you, Celeste.
Okay, thank you. So as far as ensuring the protection of who we are as a people, teaching our little ones that value of, you are a Pueblo, you are Cochiti Pueblo. I mean, it goes for other language programs as well, but speaking to that, ensuring that they know who they are as a Pueblo person, and safeguarding our traditional heritage. Because without song, without dance, without all of that language, I don't know, I can't imagine growing up without it. So it's super important that we pass that down. That's our duty as young adults, and of course our elders, and we trying to sustain all that for our people to move forward. And because it's our way of life, there's nothing else that I myself would rather do on a weekend when there's a dance happening, and just to be there and present with prayer and everything that comes with being a full participant in our traditional activities. So that we have that duty to share that and not be stingy for anything, stingy for all that knowledge that's been passed down. We owe that to our children.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you so much. Dr. Wai'ale'ale, would you like to add more? Or what would be your insight?
Sure. Anolelo No'eau came to mind with this question. Hanai ke keiki ola kalahui. Care for the keiki and our people will thrive. Our people will, our lahui will thrive. And that really says a lot about how we understand our responsibility to youth and to keiki. And so for us, in particular at Kamehameha schools, we were founded by one of our ali'i or royalty. And so all of her assets were left to us with this purpose of educating and ensuring the well-being of Native Hawaiians in Hawaii. And so we carry that koleana, both a burden and also a privilege to carry that responsibility in perpetuity for Native Hawaiian families. And so ways in which we continue to support is, yes, we have, we do operate a set of private schools in Hawaii. That's part of our trust responsibility. And we also serve preschoolers across our state. And for us, every child in our campuses and our preschools experience Hawaiian culture-based education, land-based education, language experiences, and every student needs to graduate with 2 years of Hawaiian language as a requirement. We also provide college scholarships. College to us is about a Native Hawaiian understanding and fulfilling their greater purpose for our lahui. And so getting a college degree is about using it as a tool for the ways in which they will serve our community. And so that's extremely important. And then lastly, we do invest in our staff and faculty to make sure that they understand what it means to be a role model to the students that we serve, that we want to ensure that our staff, our faculty, all of our employees really embrace who we are as a Hawaiian organization. And that means Hawaiian language classes for our staff. That also means using simple terms in everyday life. That also means being able to learn some of our cultural practices. And so for us, our work is surrounded and for families, keiki, and youth. I mean, we wouldn't exist if that was not our sole purpose for the future of our lahui, for the future of our people.
Thank you both so much for sharing. A thought that had came to mind for me is because growing up, I wasn't connected with language, and it wasn't until this past year that I finally had that interaction with it. And it was through programming that was coming out of UNCP's, it's the museum on campus, the Museum of the Southeast American Indian, and they have the Life by the River project, because, you know, the Lumbee River strolls straight through our community. And the same is for a lot of communities around here, because it's focused around developing a unified canoe song. And all the communities have come together, and they brought in like programming and workshops for children, and they had like a summer camp surrounding it. And I remember when I was attending one of these workshops, it ended up, once we learned the actual song, we were able to get out onto the water at our cultural center, and we sung this song and paddled around the water. And I remember how I was overcome with emotion because I didn't have that connection prior to that, like that moment. And I couldn't imagine like going on and not having that moment, that appreciation for it. And a statement that was made during that time that has been profound to me since is, they said that the lady that was speaking, she said, I've grown up, and, you know, there was times I didn't know my language, but by bringing in these children, they'll never have a time in their life where they didn't have that connection. And that just blew my mind. But it just makes you think about like how you both been speaking, like in the notes that I've taken, it's like how focused you are on bringing in the youth, the educating the youth, and that importance, that connection within community. So thank you both for sharing on that. And then I'll move on to our next question. And are there technological innovations or modern approaches that have proven helpful in the preservation and teaching of our Indigenous languages? I'll start with you first, Dr. Wai'ale'ale.
Michaela, I love your answer so much, because that is truly my life's work at Kamehameha schools, is the right program and the right experience for youth and children that aren't on our campuses and preschools. There's 100,000 more kids that we're not able to reach, but my job is to give those experiences, and for people like you to walk away going, I want to learn more about who I am as a Native Hawaiian. I want to learn. So I love that, because that's my job. Exactly what you said. Every day, that's my job. I talked a little bit about it, and the latest conversation for us has been about AI, artificial intelligence, and the influence of that. And primarily the discussion for us is AI can be an opportunity to grow our language, maybe even help to learn it quicker, right? More from a speaking and grammatical level, but maybe not the depth. The other is AI is still built on someone's set of values. we don't know who those values are. We don't know if it's our own. It's probably not. So there's also the opportunity there to once again colonize our language in this AI system that really does not represent our values. I know the other conversation has been, well, AI doesn't really have values, and I don't agree with that. I believe AI has values based on the maker. Who's the human behind the creator of the AI? Whoever that human is, it's based off of their values. And unless it is indigenous, I'm not sure if it's going to really be appropriate or useful for us in that way. So I am worried about AI and how we work through some of that. On the other hand, we've had tremendous growth in technology in terms of digitizing our Hawaiian language. So we have a digital Hawaiian language dictionaries. We have a few of them now. Some have started to do games like a Scrabble game, digitizing it in our language. We've been able to digitize our old newspapers that really tell our history and tell us about the context of Hawaii over the past several hundred years, tells us our history, our many stories that go back generations and generations. And those have become more and more projects have been efforts to digitize those, which gives our people access to it in so many important ways to help us maintain our language and our growth. So there's sort of the two sides of technology that both like keep me up at night and then make me excited about where possibilities are for our language growth.
I love your insight on that, and you are correct. My major in college is information science, so when it comes to AI, while there is so much that can be positive about it, there's always going to be bias to who created the system itself. And you know, people walk around with a bias each and every day, and they don't realize, who it's impacting in that. So it's like, while technology can be extremely impactful, there are ways that it can be harmful as well. Celeste, what would be your opinion on the question?
Yeah, I have that same thought of like if recordings happened, because during our, of course, ceremonies, recording and picture taking, those types of things are not allowed. And so being an oral language, it's not written, there's that due diligence that we have as a people to keep that sacred because of its use, the purpose of the language. And so when I think of audio visual materials or AI, it just scares me because we've had that direction. I've been in the like past summer programs, language summer programs, where through our council, it's been highly discouraged to use. But I think of my grandfather and, of course, other elders who had cassette tape recorders at the time, and being able to record songs so that they're kept. And to me, I feel that's safer, much safer than putting it online and it being exposed and out there for that misuse of what it is. And so when we think about our curriculum and having artists, we go back to drawings, creating drawings and things like that to support our teachers in how they're going to teach. Creating those materials can get really touchy. I know there's such great, I'm sure some app could be created for that, for the use, but it's just that exposure and how much it could get out there, and the worry that our elders, that the fear that they have in that. And so we want to keep it local, keep it for our use. And so yes, technology is great, but at the same time, it's for as far as like language preservation, it's difficult to think that it could be used in other ways where we don't want it to be exposed.
And that's where it's so important about like data sovereignty and who has access to our materials, and how it's our right to want to protect it. And that's part of I'm working on an archive for the Carolina Indian Circle at Chapel Hill. And part of that was I was wanting to find a place that's on campus where we can house it. And it's not as sensitive as, these languages and all that can come with, the recordings, the oral histories, everything along that. This has just been like more public access, but I was wanting to have it housed at the Wilson Library. Part of having it housed there is the transfer of ownership, and it was like, you can't do that. When we're sitting here and taking on a project to bring our own representation, it just seems almost wrong just to hand it back over. So there's so many ways to navigate technology in this day and time, and ways to try to protect it and, show our right for our data sovereignty and how that impacts us. And that's conversations for community and about how we bring it in and represent ourselves. And I want to say, I can't think of the website at this moment, but I know there's some Native specific websites, and it's kind of going around that content management of data in that way. I wish I could think of the name at this moment, but of course I can't. However, I just want to thank both of you for answering my questions and providing so much insight. It's extremely helpful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, and Kayla, you just helped me so much moderate. You did an incredible job. And Michaela, like sharing your story about the singing and the song, and you just took us there, and that's every Indigenous teacher's dream to be able to inspire a student like that. Just a beautiful share. So thank you both for helping to moderate this important discussion, and both your insights were just amazing. So thank you. And I am noticing our audience is super active this time around, and so I'm liking this question from one of our LinkedIn users. It says, Indigenous Nation Poets has chosen language back as their initiative for this year. Each of them are walking this path of language revitalization and its relationship to sovereignty and identity, and are at different places along the way. As writers and activists, we want to support to others doing similar work. Could you say a little bit more about collaboration? And I'll start with Dr. Arroyo first.
I love that initiative, language back. I think for us, the end of the day, it is, ea, and I constantly use that term because that's a term we talk about to both express today our ability to exercise our rights as Native Hawaiians in our everyday lives, as well as ea, meaning the breath and life that we live, that sense of sovereignty and agency that can never be separated from us as Kanaka, as Native Hawaiians. But it also means a future state of sovereignty and independence in which we want our people to achieve over time through education and through OEV or Native leadership development and lens and understanding. And so I think anytime that us as Native peoples across this space doing this work can have a conversation and connect around what does sovereignty look like for these various groups, and what does that look like to have that for your tribe, and then the ways in which they are expressed. And poetry, hands down, is like the biggest place where poetry, arts, all of that we use to express our language back, as you might say. We have people doing plays now more in our language, which is just amazing. We have more people, of course, writing poetry or mele or music, all expressing our independence and our sovereignty, both historically, present and some future. And so I would love that conversation about what does that look like across the nation, to really say, what does language back look like for each of us and collectively.
Yeah, I really thought the question was great. I love like the poet and how they're trying to revitalize it takes all sectors and all genres to really connect together and collaborate to make sure our languages stay active and alive. And I'm going to direct the next question from our audience. The question is, what guidance would you give to those who, for whatever reason, are not able to live on their tribal homelands, but yet still seek to learn their mother tongue? And I'll direct that to Celeste.
Yeah, there's a lot of different programs. Not too sure if they're within the state of New Mexico, but there's different language programs that offer online. I've seen like the Dene language being offered online, and there's that avenue because I've worked with the Native American Community Academy in Albuquerque, and so offering that not only for students but for parents and community members that live outside of the native lands, and so that's available. I know as far as the Pueblo, we have language classes that are being offered for. We have a men's and women's group that's open to community members that want to participate in those efforts in supporting people who don't live within the Pueblos tribes. So I think seeking that out and asking different different tribes of how they're supporting families that don't live on the reservation.
Yeah, thanks for that. I will also offer, like, during the pandemic, my niece is a Tiwa instructor, and so during pandemic she would get on Zoom with me and she would really help me, and so I was able to learn a lot that way. So if you have a relative that feels comfortable on Zoom, a friend, a relative, or somebody from your tribal community who will help you in that way, that's another option. So great question, and don't give up. Keep trying.
Right.
So I'd like to move on to the next question. And the next question is, how can a non-native audience or learners contribute to the efforts of language revitalization and maintenance without appropriation or insensitivity? Celeste, what are you thinking of that?
I think supporting what culturally responsive instructional practices means, and in whatever way they are able to provide that, especially like in school districts. That's the struggle that many language programs that are in the schools have, that difficulty of just being able to acknowledge that they're trying to teach the language in those spaces, and having the anti-biased teaching that recognizes the children, that our children have that unique, or that they deserve to be affirmed and celebrated within those spaces. Because not all students have the capability of attending the tribal school that's being offered. And so supporting the efforts that the districts have to maintain, and whatever the tribes are doing to put that out there for our students, and just encourage them to continue to learn and to maintain what they can. That's what's important.
Dr. Arroyo, what is your opinion on that? How should we maintain without appropriation and insensitivity?
And I guess One ask I would have is just don't be offended when you hear our language being spoken in public. I've had someone tell me, and I was having a very, very short conversation with another person that had come by to just tell me a few things. It was literally like 4 sentences we exchanged, and then he moved on. And later, that person that was sitting next to me said, "I'm really offended by what you just did." And so I said, what did I do? And she said, "It's really offensive that you didn't speak English around me." And in my brain, I thought, well, it's really offensive that you expected me to speak English around you. And so if anything, I ask that you give us space to be who we are, to practice our language in the spaces that we choose. We hear many, many different languages around us, and it's not meant to be offensive to you, but it's meant to be pride and a practice for us. And so the second for me is there's also many non-natives that embrace our language and our culture, and I'm sure that's true for many of your tribes as well. And I have tremendous respect and appreciation for them. My father is one who is not Hawaiian, but fully embraced it, being here in Hawaii and being married to a Hawaiian family. And that's a beautiful thing to see as well. And so I encourage non-natives to just have respect also for us as we learn and grow our own identity and language, but also to not be afraid of it. Don't be offended, but don't be afraid of it, when you hear it or when you engage it or when you see others engaging in it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting observation, and unfortunate you had to experience that. But I hope that becomes less and less and non-existent, those sort of experiences. This is directed to you as well, Dr. Arroyo. In the face of natural disaster and wildfires, how did you preserve and prioritize the return of language education to the community?
Our hearts are still with the families of Lahaina as they are continuing to recover. And for us as an educational organization, and with my kuleana to really be in community and to understand and to sit alongside community, we really held space and opportunity for Native voices to be heard in the recovery. And we maintain that today as the community is trying to figure out what the next steps are in the recovery of such a tragedy. And so immediately we did things short term in our investments in Maui, specifically around ensuring that Native Hawaiian families had opportunity to traditional healing, whether it was in the language or not in the language. But it was really important because we knew that all of the government agencies were going to show up, whether it was FEMA, state, local, other federal agencies, and they were going to show up and provide the best English-based services that they could provide to families. But some of our communities were reaching out and saying, we don't want that kind of service or support. We really are looking for services and support to help us through our grieving that represent who we are as a Native people. We want to grieve in our cultural ways. We want to connect and talk to others in our language. And so to the extent possible, we tried to find organizations or cultural practitioners that could provide that service. And then we also asked them to be in the communities where the government would not show up, because the government was trying to create these mass care facilities, appropriately so, but our Native Hawaiian families were not comfortable there. And so they would go to other people's homes, to other family homes, or to smaller community centers or beaches or parks. And so we really tried to redirect our resources in that way to them specifically. I think the second, as we look at recovery, we're really trying to hold space for Hawaiian language education to have its own home. We are a major landowner, very fortunate because of our princess. And so as we're thinking through our development of our lands, we've carved out educational space on purpose to say, we're just going to hold it here with the intention of the community deciding what is best for them. And if this land can serve as a place where they can have their pre-K through 12th grade Hawaiian language school be rebuilt there or built there, that we want to be part of that solution and conversation with the public education system, with the community leading that conversation about where they see the language really being recovered. And then of course that includes our preschool and early learning opportunities for language revitalization. So our efforts are really targeted on purpose in education and ways in which our language and our culture can be present and helping in the healing process, but also present when it's time to do the recovery. And then I would say last thing, one silver lining is we have amazing partners on Maui. And so Maui College, seeing what efforts were happening in the community through our support is really working with the community to establish a certificate for traditional healing. And so that's really exciting to us, because now that means that there can be more Native Hawaiians on island if they choose to get a certificate of some sort that recognizes their ability to do traditional healing for their own people. So that's an amazing silver lining for us, I think.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, to grow in that space is amazing, and I'd like to hear more about it as time goes by. So thank you for sharing that. Mm-hmm. For Celeste, can you please share some of the challenges you and your students face when educating in the Pueblo/rural setting?
Okay. One thing that we're struggling right now is to have a school built for our children. We are right now housed in a portable building and a mobile home. And so having a space to provide the education for our children is greatly needed. We're right now in a capital campaign, kind of at a silent phase right now. And so that funding, because we're a nonprofit, is difficult at times to have funding for. And so as stated before, we owe it to our children to have a place where they can call their place there in the Pueblo a home. That's what we want for our children. And so the space to have the ongoing educational experiences happen, we love a place where they can, of course, call their own. And as far as funding and supporting our community members who want to get trained, and specifically for our Indigenous Montessori training, I know we have created the IMI training service for Indigenous Montessori educators, and so funding to support community members who want to be Keres speaking guides in our school, so that it's the whole pipeline for training and supporting our community members to have diplomas to be in our classrooms and supporting our community. So those are some things that we have that challenge right now. We're doing what we can with what we have, but definitely the space is needed for our school. So that's yeah.
Yeah, no, you're just located maybe 30 miles away from my own Pueblo Sandia, and so for the longest time, Keres Children's Learning Center is just a powerful example in our communities here about language preservation and revitalization. And so, so much good things to say about Keres Children's Learning Center. Thank you. Next question. Outside of education, what are 1 or 2 language projects or initiatives that you recommend our audience check out? And I'll direct that to Dr. Arroyo.
I sort of talked about them early on, like Vaihona, maybe just as an example of using technology to kind of bring us together in different ways to share knowledge and education. But that website is not just sort of academic. It also includes other cultural knowledge that can be shared. So those are just maybe more of ideas to kind of see how language, how those tools could be used in that respect. And then we've tried other tools like Duolingo to see how that could work for us. If you go to Duolingo, it's present there. Hawaiian language is present. We worked with native speakers to do the the voiceovers and things like that. That's just another sort of maybe initiative or tool that we've tried to use to expand language opportunities that aren't necessarily in a traditional K-12 school or preschool. Yeah, those would be maybe 2 examples. And then maybe another one more recently, because it's Hawaiian Language Month for us. And so we do quite a bit of community events where we'll bring our language speaking staff to a community and we'll work with the local Hawaiian language immersion schools, and we'll put on the community event like a fair, like a Hawaiian language contest or other things, and we'll do booths and stuff all in the language just so that people can get comfortable with just being present and hearing it in the malls and in other places. So I mean, those are just more ideas around how we try to include language outside of the traditional education setting, but also making sure it's in our communities and in our supermarkets and malls.
Thanks for sharing those resources. Same thing for you, Celeste. What are 1 or 2 language projects or initiatives that you'd recommend our audience check out?
Well, as far as supporting our parents and community members, we have the Keres Children's Keres Immersion Mentor Apprentice program that is supportive of the young adults in our community. Of course, utilizing our mentors as our elders and in teaching, specifically the youth and parents. And so that's one thing that was a model that we followed to support it was specifically for parents at the time, and then it grew to our council asking how we can support the community. So it was opened up to community members to participate in. It begins in August, and it's kind of like runs through the school year. So it'll end in June of this year. And so that's one thing. I know, yes, we have the education for our youth, but also supporting the community. Also, we have our Indigenous Montessori Institute that is an anti-biased, anti-racist approach to education using Indigenous knowledge systems to deliver teacher training, specifically in the world of Montessori, because we're using that in service to teaching the language. And so there was no program that was specifically for Indigenous ways of teaching and using that different Native pedagogy to support our educators. And so the IMI Institute is it's growing, but that was built because of the need there at the Keres Children's Learning Center. So that's one thing that we want to open up and provide that to other tribes to see how we're utilizing that to support language, and then have them create that in their own communities. We've had quite a few tribes come and visit and observe what's happening in our school, and so providing that as far as professional development and technical assistance in supporting other tribes in developing a school like KCLC.
Well, I am getting the signal here to wrap things up. And so we want to make sure we give our panelists the last word here. Our audience spans the entire sector and beyond, from funders and Native nonprofits to elected officials and budding future leaders. What is something that you want to leave them with and having a better understanding of or a response to? And with that, I'll start with Celeste.
I think, let's see, that the work doesn't stop, and we need to continue to support. We're owed that as Native people. It was taken from us in many ways, and so we shouldn't. I hear Trisha in my ear, Trisha Mokino telling me we're owed that. And so whatever efforts we have in place to support language revitalization, and I just think of how important it is that the fight continues, and we're doing what we can to support each other as far as tribes, and helping supporting our efforts is what's needed to help us move forward in this work, this precious work.
Yeah, thank you. Final words?
Yeah, thank you. Celeste, I really have been appreciating hearing your story. So I just, first of all, thanks for sharing that. As language acquisition and preservation gets stronger and stronger, I think that we're going to have to get better at it. Language is not stagnant. Language is not superficial. It's deep, and it expresses the thoughts of our ancestors, of our kupuna, and how we continue to make sure that is held in the right ways, in the right spaces going forward, is going to be really important. And I appreciate Kala was here today. That was a beautiful surprise for me to see a Native Hawaiian youth who has such an amazing future ahead of her. And I'm sure her story is what I hope is the norm, just like my own children, where they don't remember a time not speaking our language. And I want that for every youth and every one of us going forward, that there's just not a time when our language was never a part of who they are. And so from what should philanthropy's role be? What I hope that they can let our Indigenous people lead that recovery, that restoration, that sovereignty that we're seeking and holding space today and tomorrow. And so ways in which philanthropy can get comfortable with taking the lead and knowing that their investment is in this space of revitalization of our language, and know that I believe we hold ourselves to a tremendously high standard from a measures and outcomes and all of that, things that probably funders or philanthropists would want to see. But let's have a conversation about what that is, and give our Native communities the opportunity to hold ourselves to our highest of expectations that our ancestors and our kupuna would hold us to anyway. I bet it would be higher than most people expect it to be.
Wow. I'm so thankful for this panel, all the way from just up the street in Cochiti to across the ocean in Hawaii, all your beautiful insight. Thank you for everything you do in community. I wish you all the best. I send you strong prayers for the work that's needed and for our Native Youth Grantmakers who helped me moderate today. They did an outstanding job. Kala and Makea, thank you so much. Outstanding. At this point, I will turn it back over to Winoka.
Thank you, Steph. And thank you all for joining us today and being a part of this important discussion on Indigenous language acquisition and preservation. Many thanks to our moderators, Steph, Kala, and Makea, and to our panelists, Dr. Arroyo and Celeste, for bringing their unique perspectives and expertise to the table. We would also like to thank our audience for your continued support in our ongoing programming, and in particular, your support for our member education session series. As a reminder, this session was open to the public as a highlight of our member benefits. If you're not a NAT member and want to learn more, please visit our website at nativephilanthropy.org. Also, don't miss out on Native Americans in Philanthropy's upcoming annual conference this spring. Join us in Minneapolis, Minnesota from April 22nd to 25th. Registration is now open, but hurry as early bird pricing ends on February 25th and tickets are limited. Visit conference.nativephilanthropy.org for more details. Also, keep an eye out for an email containing a link to a brief survey. It should only take about 5 to 6 minutes to complete, but offers invaluable insights for our team's planning. Coming up is our March member education session, in which we will explore Indigenous representation in pop culture and media. We look forward to welcoming you back on March 14th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you once again for joining us this afternoon, and have a wonderful day.